Our meeting tonight is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy.
I am very grateful to be here tonight and for all that I have learned here in Plainfield about Christian Science. I wanted to give gratitude tonight for a revelation that I've had pretty recently that helped me to get real peace with my past. During the years before I came here, I truly tried to be a good son and husband and father and worker to the best of my ability at the time. I didn't drink or smoke or do anything I felt would be disloyal to the people I was with. I was always where I said I would be. And despite that, everything kept crashing down around me. Family was always upset with me. Marriages always ended in failure. Jobs felt like they went nowhere. By the time I arrived here in Plainfield, I knew that I was ready to move forward on a different path because that old way of living just clearly was not working. But it wasn't until recently that I truly and clearly understood why it didn't work. It wasn't because of who I was with or where I lived or the type of work I was doing. It was because it was all done humanly and without God. Anytime we find ourselves working from the standpoint of the human mind, everything will crash and burn eventually. Human mind is never on our side. Coming here and learning about Christian Science and working with a practitioner here has been so important for me. I've learned to truly trust God and to listen for divine inspiration all day long. I've learned that God is the only attraction. So any attempt at a relationship of any kind without God in the middle cannot last. But now, with God at the center of all my interactions and my work, life has been fulfilling and joy-filled in a way it never could have been before. I'm so thankful for this understanding, which could only come from Christian Science as taught in this church, and for the peace I now have. Thank you. And now we have testimony from Patricia in Canada.
A long time ago, I was working in advertising as an assembly paste-up artist. The bottom of the pile, so to speak. But I loved that job. Once, when I was applying at a new company, I let it be known that if the position ever opened up for a production manager, I would like to be among those to be considered for it. After a while, that position did open up, but I wasn't interviewed for it. Instead, another girl was quick to be given the job. I couldn't understand it because I knew that she had no portfolio or prior experience, and it seemed that she was awarded the job because she was coochie-cooing up to the boss. And I had not been prepared to do that. When she handed out jobs, we all felt that she did so in a demeaning way. And she didn't allow anyone to ask any questions whenever her vague directions often couldn't be understood by us. However, as I watched her, I could see that she would organize certain things in different ways than I sometimes did, and they were very efficient. So I watched closely and learned. From my Bible studies, I knew that I was not obeying the commandment, "Thou shalt not covet," due to my wanting her job. After praying, I realized that the divine mind is the placement officer, and that everything is in its right place when spiritually perceived. The turning point in my thinking came when I completely stopped outlining, and I realized that nothing could be added that would make things better for me than they already always were, since I was in love's presence doing love's work. I stopped criticizing and appreciated her more and more, even though she was still hard to work with. But I decided to mind my own business and focus on loving and doing the best job I could to the glory of God. Within a few days, she announced that she had been hired to do a better job elsewhere, and she just suddenly left. Without an interview, I was given the promotion to production manager. God moved me into that new role only when I was first made ready, as I did need practical and spiritual training. By observing, I had learned the thou shalt nots of giving out jobs abusively, not allowing questions, and that I shouldn't covet, as well as the thou shalts of treating others well, using organizational skills specific to the job, trusting God's plan, and being humble. All this would be required in that tough job ahead. But now I was ready, and I loved that position with all its challenges. Also, it comforts me that no matter what evil or destructive human plans or agendas the human mind may invent, God's plan overrules all else. I'm very grateful that God has moved me now into the position of membership in the Plainfield Church, where I am again training to learn about how to go about life scientifically in service to God, my employer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the beautiful readings tonight and the beautiful music. I'm very grateful for the deep, life-changing lessons and healing that I am receiving from my practitioner here at Plainfield and working for this cause of Christian Science. I've had several recently, but tonight the one I'm most grateful for is realizing the great need to keep the flame of love and gratitude deep and strong. Gratitude to God, to Christ Jesus, and Mrs. Eddy, my practitioner and fellow church members. This is keeping oil in the lamp. I had thought I was being grateful enough as I buzzed around my days, and I did have many things that I was grateful for. But what I drifted away from was the necessary feeling of reverence and respect and love for Mrs. Eddy and Christian Science, the kind that burns within you as described by the disciples on the walk to Emmaus after Jesus spoke to them after his resurrection. Gilbert Carpenter writes in Mary Baker Eddy's Spiritual Footsteps in Chapter 1, quote, Mrs. Eddy's concern as leader, since she was endeavoring to wean her students from the narrow conception which fancied that sitting in a chair and saying God is love constituted the demonstration of Christian Science. As she once said to a student, you may sit in your chair all day and say over beautiful words, and it does not amount to anything. It is the spirit that is needed. End quote. When faced with problems, as I drifted away from this gratitude, I began using human will and allowed things to go unhealed. And then I started dumping it on my practitioner. I was not taking responsibility for my own spiritual work to be guided by the mind of God. I was trying to fix negative things such as resentment and jealousy with human effort instead of truly purging it with Christian Science. Some of this I had harbored for years. And although I knew it was wrong and I didn't want it, I was using human effort. I believe this would not have happened if I had really kept the flame of love and gratitude full in my heart. We are warned that we will lose what we are not grateful for, and we will no longer be useful to God. As this was brought to my attention, and the flame of gratitude returned for all that God is doing in my life, I could feel the huge difference, and the joy and clarity return in the redemptive grace of God's love. Now, as I'm reading Science and Health, powerful lines are standing out that are healing and reaching deep and clearing my thought and healing. I'm so grateful for it, and I'm seeing how truly this is the only way we can solve anything. I'm very, very grateful for our good God, Christ Jesus, Mrs. Eddy, and my practitioner and this wonderful independent church. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for those wonderful readings on the heaven or harmony we seek is right here. I'd like to share something that shows, as was read, that the tabernacle of God is with men. On Sunday, the Plainfield Church calendar statement said, quote, "It does not matter how dire your situation may seem, or how trapped you might feel, God will provide a way," end quote. Mary Beth Singletary. The promise of this statement has been proven over and over again. The following is such an account, which was printed in the Christian Science Sentinel in 1910. Quote, "Young Mr. and Mrs. Clark from Montana were both devoted students of Christian Science. Mr. Clark was also a mining engineer, and accompanied by his wife, he had gone deep into a great forest to examine a mine. On the day of their arrival at their proposed camp, they found themselves surrounded by a forest fire which grew to huge proportions, with no way of escape. Together with the 5 miners, they battled the flames, at times beating out the fire on one another's clothing, or going down to the ground for a breath of air. All this time, the Clarks were doing their best to declare the power of God to save them. At a terrifying crisis, after they had been battling the flames for more than 7 hours, Mrs. Clark called to her husband, "Oh, let's despise the danger. God never made it. This would have to destroy God before it could destroy his reflection." This was the turning point. And soon what seemed a miracle appeared. A long green unburned path which the fire had passed around, and along which all 7 found their way to safety. End quote. This account may be found in a biography of Mary Baker Eddy, The Womanhood of God, Volume 3, The Forever Leader, by Doris Skrickle. And that was page 565. And this book is available at thebookmark.com. And I thank you so much for this service tonight. I thank you for the readings again, and the testimonies, and the beautiful music. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
Well, I've had so many life-saving lessons here that I'm grateful for. I was thinking recently about one. Mrs. Evans was our teacher and practitioner when we got here, was very good about teaching us lessons that we needed to learn. She had a clear understanding of what I needed to learn, I think. And there's a statement in Science and Health that she taught us about one day. And the statement, the quote that Mrs. Eddy wrote goes, "We must forsake the foundation of material systems, however time-honored, if we would gain the Christ as our only Savior." And she went on to mention that one of the material systems that all of us have to forsake or learn to forsake is the idea that we belong to human parents, that we belong to other family members, or that their children belong to them, all because there is this so-called human connection. Well, this was a tough one for me because I kind of liked my family. But Mrs. Eddy also wrote that family should be this may not be a direct quote, but family should be the center, but not the boundary of the affections. And then Mrs. Evans went on to explain that there is a higher sense of family that applies to all of us. That there is a family of God, where God is the only father, mother of all of us. That my human parents are God's children, just as I am. That my so-called human children are God's children, just as I am. And none of us here on earth belongs to anybody else here on earth. We all belong to God. And as Jesus once said, and is in the Bible, that my real family are those who love and do the will of God and are honest and are humble. And I've found a great family among people who I am not related to. And that is the closest and clearest and strongest and best and really the only sense of family that I have learned to love. Well, as this realization has become cemented in my consciousness, it has freed me of so many things, so many restrictions, limitations, so many problems. It has improved my relationships with my human family members. Sometimes it has surprised them, but it has always improved our relationships. And it does away with the idea that we can inherit any bad traits. So I am just very grateful for the teaching that I've received here, for the many lessons that I have learned that has changed my life. Grateful to be a member of this church, and thank you, Florence, for the fine readings. And it's so good to be with you all tonight.
Thank you. Shardy.
Good evening. Tonight I would like to express my gratitude for this amazing Plainfield Christian Science Independent Church and how it operates under God's law and direction every day. Last week we had a membership meeting where all the committees gave their detailed reports as well as an accounting for all the money spent in maintaining this God's house. Everything done here is to the glory of God. I noticed several years ago that every decision is taken to prayer before any job or purchase is made, even such things as paper for printing or a new roof. Economy, wisdom, and frugality are the components of righteous prayer for all activities here. This church also supports the Plainfield community at large in certain instances, and it is done discreetly and wisely. It is very heartwarming and satisfying to observe such outstanding day-to-day order and structure of God's Plainfield Independent Church. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet from Georgia. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I am so grateful that God brought me to this church. I'm learning, as a previous testifier said, so much. I'm able to apply it to my daily life. I would like to give gratitude tonight for an experience I had, many years ago. It seemed like every time I planned a trip to visit my family, something would come up, would try to deter the trip. One evening, while I was packing for a trip, I walked into the den and asked my husband what he would like to take. And he said, well, we have a problem. There seems to be a squirrel stuck between the firebox and the wall. I don't think we can go. We can't leave him there. And it's late. We can't get anyone to come out and take care of him, so we'll have to postpone the trip. Well, my disappointment was great. But I left the den and started packing. And as I was packing, I stopped for one moment and I said, Father, this is your child, this little squirrel. You can show him the way out. And I know no harm can come to him, for I know he hears your voice. Later that evening, I had finished packing and went to talk to my husband. And he said the squirrel had gotten out somehow. He said he hadn't heard him for at least a half an hour, so that our plans were still on and we could leave the scheduled time. This statement from Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and he will direct your path. That's Proverbs 3. And this also from Mrs. Eddy. God is ever present and ready to help me, and I trust in him. My faith is planted on a rock that is immovable. I'm so grateful that we can turn to God in every instance. He is a very present help. And the one big lesson that I have learned is not my will, but his be done. And when I do that, everything turns out very harmoniously. We proceeded on our trip, and we had a wonderful time. My family was happy to see me, and I, of course, was happy to see them. I'm grateful for this church. I'm grateful to God, our leader, Mary Baker Eddy. I'm grateful to my practitioner who is guiding me. And I am grateful to be here this evening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. With all the storms we've been having lately, it reminds me of the time I was coming home from being on a trip, and a nor'easter storm had developed off the coast. And I was getting practitioner help on the trip, and also praying myself that the trip was going to be harmonious and that there wouldn't be any difficulties. And as we were getting ready to come into Newark Airport, the pilot said, we're going to have a very bumpy landing. There's a nor'easter going on down below us, and it's going to be quite a ride. So I kept praying, and one of my favorite things that is in Watches, Prayers, and Arguments that Mrs. Eddy has used in handling the weather, that the face of God is there, and I can see it. So I prayed with that a lot, and I knew my practitioner was working as well. And all of a sudden, there were stars, and the landing was not bumpy. It was perfectly calm and perfectly comfortable. And as we were leaving the plane, I saw the pilot was talking to someone, and I overheard him say, I've never seen anything like that in my life. He said, as we were coming into the airport, the storm was moving out. And he was just so amazed, and I was extremely grateful to God because it's only the power of God that could have done that. We had a perfectly comfortable landing, and everyone got off the plane fine and dandy, and it just was the power of God, the hand of God, taking care of the whole plane and everyone in it. So very, very grateful for Christian Science and for all the wonderful demonstrations that we've had of God's love. And thank you. Sharon.
One of the first experiences I had when I first came to this church, I went to a meeting, a church meeting, and after the meeting there was ice and snow on the ground, and I got stuck with my car. No one was around. I never drove on snow before, and I had no idea what to do. So I just asked God, and I got the thought to call a practitioner. And I was met with so much love, and she gave me from Mrs. Eddy's hymn, "Love looseth thee and lifted thee, ayond hate's thrall." And she said, just go back to your car, be peaceful, and pull out. And that's exactly what happened. I never forgot that. That was something I never saw anything like that in my life. And like I said, it was my first experience driving in the snow. And I'm grateful to say God's always taken care of me since that time. I'm just so grateful for the lessons that we learn in this church. For there is an answer for every problem. And thank you for the beautiful readings.
Thank you. Kara from New Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the wonderful readings, Florence. On Sunday's roundtable, everybody was talking about the importance of sometimes a good rebuke or wake-up call, and it made me think of something that happened last week when I was on a very long road trip, 3-day road trip. And as I was leaving the place I was staying, early in the morning, it was still dark out, I wasn't looking where I was going, and I smacked into a big beam, and it knocked me down to the ground. And I immediately began to pray, claiming that there is no pain in truth. And this was really, really helpful, and I was able to pack up the car and keep going. But as I drove away, I felt like there were a lot of fearful thoughts clamoring for my attention, and two stuck out. One was that if we're not paying attention when we're praying for the world and reading the news, sometimes all of the medical news or the fearful news can start to seem real. And also, as we get older, the idea that there are all of these things that do not come from God that begin to, if we don't pay attention and usher them out of consciousness, they can start to seem more real than they did when we were younger, or certainly when we were children. And so I realized that this was a wake-up call and a real opportunity to pray about this. So I turned on the testimony meeting from last week, which I hadn't been able to attend because I was driving, and I began to listen to it. And I just was so moved by the powerful testimonies last week. And all of a sudden, I remembered this funny thing that had happened. I decided, this was many years ago, I wanted to learn how to snowboard. And so I took a group lesson, which consisted of the instructor, me, and a bunch of 7-year-old boys. And the 7-year-old boys just got it right away. They were just zipping along, and they would fall down and get up, and they were laughing. Well, every time I fell down, I felt like I understood those comic strip characters where they saw stars, and it was really challenging. So I wasn't going to give up, so I took another snowboarding lesson, but this time without the 7-year-old boys. I took a private lesson. And on my first run down, I fell down constantly. And on the lift up, I said to the ski instructor, the snowboard instructor, who was like 18, I said, I just, really don't like falling down. And he looked me in the eye and he said, dude, you have to get over the idea that falling is bad. And I looked at him and I was like, oh my gosh, You're so right. And as we went up the rest of the hill, I looked below me, and all the skiers were upright and making these beautiful turns, but snowboarders fall all the time, and they sit all the time. They're on the ground constantly. And I thought, when I was a kid, falling didn't seem bad. But this idea as I got older that there was a right way to be a grown-up and it didn't involve falling down, well, after that, snowboarding became this pure joy for me. And it was this incredible understanding for me that if we are as little children, then we can keep that open-mindedness, and we're seeing everything as God sees it and not as the human sees it. And so I realized that that's really what's happened to me since I've been at Plainfield, that I had this sort of idea of Christian Science, that we're all supposed to sort of shush down the mountain and make these beautiful turns and go have some après-ski conviviality, whereas Plainfield is a lot more like snowboarding, where you have to get over the idea that falling is bad. And I just burst out laughing, and I felt so full of joy at this realization. Well, at that moment, I heard God say to me, and it is true. God said, "Well, you do always say you like a good spiritual kick in the head. That's what you got this morning, a nice spiritual kick upside the head." And it was true. It was this beautiful opportunity for me to see through a lie and claim the allness of God. And so Sunday's Roundtable, which spoke a lot about this, and the opportunity to demand the blessing and see the joy and gratitude in every fall has been one of the great gifts of Plainfield. Thank you so much for the readings tonight and for all of these wonderful meetings for all of us who listen from afar.
Thank you. Day from Georgia. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Today's calendar quote reads, "Getting out of trouble, is simply a matter of waking up," by Peter V. Ross. This is one of the greatest lessons I've learned through my study of Christian Science in this church. All that we have on the website, combined with years of daily experiences, have led me to the understanding that there truly are no problems, because there is nothing too big for God to handle. I'm learning that there is no question I can be presented with or challenge I can be faced with that God doesn't already have the answer to. When I find myself feeling afraid, overwhelmed, stuck, or confused, I now know that the true remedy is to wake up mentally and get my thought right back to God. Learning to start my day with prayer and continue throughout is what helps me to remember to call out to my loving Father at any time. And even if his response seems delayed, he always answers, and answers right on time. I'm so thankful for learning to live this way. Thank you for the readings, the music, and all of the testimonies tonight. I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I am so grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for all that she has given us. It's amazing. It's through this studying Christian Science, that I realized that heaven was not somewhere. And it seems like we're all looking for that harmony. And yet he says it's within us. This kingdom is within us, the reign of harmony within us. And I like what he says in 154 of Miscellaneous Writings, that it is the purpose of divine love to resurrect the understanding and the kingdom of God, the reign of harmony already within us. Through the word that is spoken unto you, are you made free. Abide in his word, and it shall abide in you, and the healing Christ will again be made manifest in the flesh, understood and glorified. I mention this because
in the practice and as well as what I used to do, there are so many good instruction or just little truths that come that I never rested with. This resting in God does not mean, sleeping. It means trusting more the truth that God has spoken, or through someone is being spoken to me. Either someone says it or by inspiration, you're hearing these things said. And I found that when I kept these words that came, in those quiet moments, sometimes I'll be crying and this beautiful words would come. When I paid attention to it and kept it in my heart and meditated on it, it is what freed me from the disturbance in thinking. And that often gave me the peace that I was looking for, the harmony that I was seeking. I just wanted to mention that I'm very grateful for science coming to our family, for what it's done for us so far. I'm grateful to continue to learn what this truth can do for all mankind. I pray that as people get to know this church, they're learning also what so many have already written about. And of course, what Mrs. Eddy has left for all mankind. So happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Good evening, everyone. A few things to read tonight. The first from Virginia. Sincere gratitude for our beautiful and inspiring service. That was this past Sunday. The reader spoke so clearly and made it easy to listen to this lesson on love. I also want to thank the musicians and singers and the roundtable host. Thank you all. And then another from Virginia. Many thanks for the wonderful roundtable and inspiring church service on Sunday, January 30th. Laura's sweet voice singing Love Grows Here and accompanied by Jared, both singing and playing, brought tears to my eyes. I have listened several times already. Thanks and blessings to all. Love certainly does grow here. In Illinois, this morning I was listening to the lesson and my thought became distracted, so I restarted the lesson. My thought became distracted again and again, and each time I restarted the lesson, knowing that mortal mind was trying to keep me from hearing the word of God that I needed to hear. Finally, I got past the third Bible section. Yay, a wonderful lesson, which I look forward to studying and studying. So grateful that my thought is more and more attuned to God, and my spiritual consciousness is growing stronger and stronger. I looked up the word attune to find the correct spelling, and one of its definitions is to make harmonious. So true that right thinking makes everything more harmonious. With much love. And then Australia. This quote in Signs and Health reveals a Mary Baker Eddy gem I can empathize with. I'm sharing the gem as a post so that you may also appreciate it. And it's, quote, Mary Baker Eddy subscribed to an Orthodox creed in early youth and tried to adhere to it until she caught the first gleam of that which interprets God as above mortal sense. End quote. And then this from California. My readings took me to the poems of Grace White, a Christian scientist who lived in New York. She wrote a poem for each season, and I wanted to share what she wrote about Pleasant View in winter. Pleasant View being Mrs. Eddy's home in Concord, New Hampshire. And this poem is from February 24th, 1906 issue. Pleasant View in Winter by Grace White. On bush and tree and bare brown earth, the glistening snow, the wind is heaping, and far beyond the sloping hills, the lengthening shadows now are creeping. From out the garden's frosty beds, no flower faces now are peeping. Beneath its shiny, icy covers, The little pond is soundly sleeping. And then this from England. Thank you very much for the excellent roundtable last Sunday, which I have listened to a couple of times. So interesting that we have to be listening to ensure we are guided by God in all that we do, even good works, so that we're guided to do the right thing, not just the humanly good thing. Quite a thought that way we are growing our apples, not just tying them onto the tree. Thank you so much, with much love and gratitude. And then this is from Hawaii. Recently, while reading the Gospel according to John, I thought it might be good to listen to a version of it. After searching YouTube, I came across one read by David Suchet, who immortalized Agatha Christie's long-running Poirot mystery series. He has a voice that is both rich and mesmerizing at the same time, so I began to listen to it. I'm not familiar with the Bible version he was using, but it lacked the richness and context of the King James Version that we use at Plainfield. It quickly became a disappointment. The dramatic tenor he affected and the interpretation of the dialogue seemed overdone and lacked sincerity. There wasn't a moment to reflect nor absorb it thoughtfully. It was truly full of the letter, but not the spirit, despite his theatrical tone. This brings me to the point I wanted to make. We are so lucky to have such wonderful and dedicated readers at our church who read the weekly Bible lesson with simple, pure, and honest voices. I am so grateful for this, and grateful that Plainfield is not full of theatrical displays that may easily snare an audience, but lack the meat needed for growth. Just wanted to share this. Much aloha to all. I have to say I do agree with that. Sometimes people ask me if I've listened to other things, other religious things on YouTube. Rarely do I ever listen to anything but that which is put forth from this church, because you do feel that great sincerity in the voices, and also the feeling that it's not just words to them, it's something they love and that they've proven, and that gives it the clout and the depth that is so necessary. I'm very grateful tonight for those readings and also the beautiful hymns we sang. I love the attention that was given tonight to the Lord's Prayer. It's something that I've been working with to a greater degree. It's very easy just to read it very quickly or say it to yourself very quickly and not really think about how powerful it is, what a powerful statement of truth and a treatment it is. And the words, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And then Mrs. Eddy's spiritual translation of it, "Thy kingdom is come, thou art ever present. Enable us to know, as in heaven, so on earth, God is omnipotent, supreme." To me, this is a very simple but clear key to how to demonstrate heaven on earth. To know this, to know that God's kingdom is come, He is ever present, and then to ask God to enable me to know, that word enable, to supply with power or ability, to furnish with complete knowledge and skill. Please help me to know that as in heaven, so on earth, God is omnipotent, supreme. If we know this, we know that God's kingdom is come and that He is ever present, and ask God to help us to know, as in heaven, so on earth, His omnipotence and His supremacy. That is heaven on earth. It's so powerful. Every sentence in that Lord's Prayer is so powerful, and Mrs. Eddy's interpretation of it. I've vowed to myself, I will never just listen to it aimlessly, so to speak, or not with my whole heart and soul engaged in it. So I'm so very grateful for those beautiful readings, the theme tonight, our beautiful music, and to be with you here. And have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.